Nice to see you, everybody.
This one you can back up. Yeah.
All right, Lauren, we're good. And welcome to our Kingsburg City Council workshop. The council chamber is open to the public at 100% capacity. Tonight's Wednesday, March 9th, 2022. We'll call this meeting to order. Can you please do roll call, Madam Clerk? Councilmember Palmer?
Here.
Councilmember Purcell Jr.?
Here.
Councilmember Roman? I'm here. Mayor North? Here. All right. Councilmember Hurtado won't be here tonight. Item number 2 is public comment. Any person may directly address the council at this time on any item not on the agenda or on any item that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. A maximum of 5 minutes is allowed for each speaker. Do we have anyone here from the public that would like to make public comment tonight? Being none, we will close public comment and we will move to item 3. The American Rescue Plan, Coronavirus, State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds Use Discussion. Presentation by City Manager Alexander Henderson.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here. I know most people are here, but Alex Henderson, I'm the City Manager. Purpose for tonight's meeting, a few things. We had an original workshop in July of last year. So it's kind of serve as an update to that. A couple of things have changed since then. Probably most important is that we got final guidance from the Treasury Department. So it kind of gave us a little bit more insight on what we can spend these funds on. Also looking, obviously, for additional community input and maybe some processes going forward for gathering some more of that input, whether it be through surveys or more workshops. And then, hopefully narrowing some of our focus on potential projects, at least for the upcoming year. I'll do a little bit of background on the actual funds itself to kind of indicate what the funds can be spent on and what our timeline is for spending those as well. So informal, so please raise your hand, ask questions, jump in if I go a little quickly on this. So happy to go actually to the slides. We'll jump to the slides. I'm just going to do a couple of the initial ones. Again, just a quick overview. Obviously, some significant legislation last year that allocated funding to all cities in the United States, cities, villages, towns, $350 billion, states as well. Obviously, the key objectives is to fight the pandemic and really assist with recovery as we come out of the pandemic, hopefully. We had some initial insights. We actually received our first allotment in June of last year. We'll receive our second allotment, or our second 50%, May of this year. Kingsburg is getting just shy of $2.9 million that we can spend on eligible projects. Some of the changes since the last time we met, you can see some of these were the original main key eligible use categories. So replacement of lost revenue for municipalities, response to the pandemic, premium pay for essential workers, and then there were some carve-outs as well for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. What's changed a little bit, and is probably the most vital piece of information from the final rule, is that the Treasury Department made simplification. Think of it similar to like the standard deduction that you might take as part of your taxes, right? So a big one for us is that any community can do this, but because our allocation is less than $10 million, we're, from a reporting standpoint, basically can just say that we're going to take the standard allowance and then we can use those funds on anything that we usually would spend money on from a government standpoint. So that, for us, kind of opens the door, makes reporting a lot easier, but then also gives us a lot of flexibility with how those funds are spent. So that's purpose for this, tonight's discussion obviously is to get some of that feedback, talk about those projects that are important to the community, and then, prioritization as well. So that's kind of a brief overview, really quick one, but it's kind of the top line thing that we need to know going into this. Any questions before I kind of jump into the review of our meeting last July? So there are some packets out there, but I'll pull up the summary. So we met originally towards the end of July of last year, and there was a number of different ideas that came out. At that individual meeting, we had a handful or 6 total votes to try and give some priority, but again, we were waiting a little bit with regards to whether or not some or all of these projects were going to be eligible for us to spend the funding on. As you'll see, you can basically everything that we had as an idea has now become an eligible funding source because we're under the $10 million threshold. There are a couple of things that we talked about last time that kind of our needs have been met a little bit via other funding sources. So we had talked about doing some, basically some utility billing forgiveness, debt forgiveness, like for our water and things like that. The state actually came up with a program for that. We participated in it. Public Works and Finance Department spearheaded that, and so we've actually received those funds and we've credited all those eligible accounts, and so we've been able to utilize that for purposes of some debt relief. Our senior meals program, we are utilizing some ARPA dollars for our senior meals program, but we've been lucky enough to get some funding through our CDBG program. So our Community Development Block Grant program is another federal program that we can use, and they actually allocated some funding that they didn't think that they were going to be able to at the beginning of the pandemic to our senior meal program, which has been really successful, and Adam and his team have done a really good job. We've talked about it a bunch, but they've delivered over 60,000 meals during the pandemic to Kingsburg seniors, and that's been through the help of KCAPS as well, and a lot of volunteers in the community. So, but we've been lucky to use some of those other programs as well. And probably the only other thing that I would say that we don't totally know about now is that, in the interim, since we met last time, the federal government also passed an infrastructure bill. So there is additional funding separate from ARPA dollars that will flow to the states that then essentially the city can potentially tap for some of these projects as well. So I think, the real goal from, staff's perspective is to, leverage these funds, but then also try and get our funding for other eligible projects through those programs as well, so that we can really, stretch these dollars long term. So a couple of the new projects, or a couple of things that have kind of come up maybe since that last meeting, and this is not all inclusive, so I kind of want to talk some more about this tonight because I know there's been other ideas too, but we've been having some significant conversations about the potential for building out a fiber optic network here in the community. We have there's some sort of a backbone infrastructure that's coming down Golden State and going towards Coffee Pot Park, but there's then the opportunity to build that out into the rest of the community, which really offers, reliable, high-speed internet that then would be accessible to all residents and all businesses, and gives some more options, and something that obviously we saw become a really large need in the middle of the pandemic when everyone was working from home and students were going to school, and just a really big tax on the networks that are here. And obviously there are some handful of players of Comcast and some of the other ones, but some of their speeds are limited. So that's come out since our last meeting. And we do have a public safety camera program that I know we talked a little bit about last time, but that's been growing. So actually just Monday, the Public Safety Committee just recommended to allocate another $10,000 for that project. to add some more cameras to that system. But then also with, kind of the new final rule allowing us to utilize the funds for some, some of the things that we already do, and we're in a good position we have some of these programs already, are to partner with, some of the groups in town. So whether it be partnering with the chamber or partnering with the bid, the bid group. We already have some programs like our microgrant program, our facade alley improvement programs that we could expand or continue to support. Those are included as well. And then, as we've been having a lot more of the discussion about the ARPA funds, it's kind of been, we're coming up on the point where we're about to look again at we did a 5-year strategic plan in 2018, and so we're getting close to the point where we're needing to update that. Then that also brings up our general plan. So the last time that the city's general plan was updated, I think it was in the early 90s.
30 years ago.
Yeah, 30 years ago. So those are big lifts, obviously, which is some of the reason why it's been 30 years since we've redone them. We've had some conversation both with the planning commission and with the council about, the North Kingsburg specific plan and potentially rolling that into a general plan update and part of that process. That was done in 2005, so, coming up on close to 20 years for that. So are there changes from that we'd like to see? And then, we've had a lot of success getting grants for our parks, and as we have new subdivisions going, adding to our parks, but we don't, our parks master plan is pretty dated as well and not very specific. So there's some components there from a planning perspective that might make sense in terms of us trying to, really figure out how we spend these dollars, how we leverage them, with other, federal dollars, whether they be for our state dollars, whether they be the local match. But then also too, trying to pick, what the program is for is more transformative projects. I actually use that wording in some of the webinars. So, these are one-time dollars. They're intended to support sort of one-time, maybe capital projects or, grant projects or things that don't necessarily have a long-term, I would say not spending these dollars on personnel, for example, because first, the money's going to go away at some point when we spend it, and then you've got a question about personnel. And, from an overall, city standpoint, the council, was really conservative at the beginning of the pandemic. Thankfully, we are in a good spot financially, starting to see, not maybe where we were from a revenue standpoint pre-pandemic, but just from a planning standpoint, we're feeling comfortable about where we're at with revenues and, and spending plan. So I think we really have an opportunity to kind of pick and choose if that's where it gets hard, right? It's going to get hard now to figure out which one of these projects and which one of these priorities, we want to sort of narrow these things down to. So there are a couple of things too, just from the staff, a couple of things that we have been approved. So council approved hazard pay for city employees dating back in the middle to the beginning of the pandemic, so for all full-time employees. There are some MOU impacts that are being realized, utilizing ARPA funds, so that's all of our employee groups, 2022 to 2024. We have some funding in there in the senior meal program. I think we thought that was going to be higher. I've kind of left a placeholder because I'm not 100% sure yet, just because we are, as I mentioned earlier, trying to use some of those other outside funds. And then there's a couple of recommendations in here, just because these are some things that I know are occurring already. So council approved, we got just shy of $200,000 from a non-competitive parks grant. Council to put restrooms at Asphalt Park, but there is a portion of that the city will be required to match. So we included that in here. We're redesigning the community development space just next door, so that we can put some more folks in there and kind of update some of those facilities. And then I just put a placeholder in here for parks improvements, because if you go back to the top, when we did our voting last time, the one that received the most votes at 9 was providing recreational opportunities. So that could be a set aside, whether that's for the sports complex, whether that's for, that becomes a set aside that we save for a later date if we do decide to do a parks master plan or something like that. But these are just, some, I guess, kickoff ideas to, potentially, get this process started. So that's a proposal of about $1 million, and that shows about, a 1.8 million remaining. But, we have, until the end of 2024 to, allocate or at least encumber, the money. They don't have to be spent by then. They have to be spent by the end of 2026. So, one of the recommendations that staff is making too is that we really try and focus maybe on, the next year, the upcoming budget, because I think that there's, we're in a good spot financially that we don't necessarily have to allocate all these funds, spend all these funds right away. We're not sure what will happen over the next 3 or 4 years. So just from a sound financial planning standpoint, there's some benefits of waiting there. So I think the questions that I were going to ask are what do we view as the biggest community need right now? How do we start to narrow this some more? So I want to jump in or ask questions of things that I haven't covered yet. But I mean, really, our purpose tonight is to just get feedback. The department heads are here as well, so they obviously have. We've been talking a lot about individual projects and potential for their importance too. So we want to make sure that their opinions are included.
Hi, I'm Bruce Blaney. I'm on the planning commission, have been on council previously, have some history with the city. One of the things, and you heard Alex mention it, planning, the general plan, 30 years old. When you go ahead and apply for grants and everything else, one of the questions that oftentimes comes up on their application forms, how current is your housing element? How current is your parks element? All those kind of things are part of the general plan. And we would like to, and the planning commission has talked about this, we'd like to update our general plan, but one of the problems is the cost of the environmental impact studies that have to be done. You're talking anywhere from, depending on how extensive the impact study has to be, anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000. I mean, it's very, very expensive. We were able to go ahead and partner with a number of cities previously to get our housing element updated and certified, because we were able to work through cooperative agreement through COG. Yeah, through COG. That's right. That's who funded it. I can't remember who funded it. Anyway, but I very strongly would urge you to consider planning and the expenses that go into planning. Now, putting a hard number on how much the environmental impact and the consultant that you have to hire to go ahead and do it, I don't have a good figure on that. But unfortunately, I'm thinking it's going to be upwards of $350,000 minimum. And that's my plug. I mean, because you talk about planning, you can't really get all this stuff done unless you have a plan. And in 2002, when we wound up putting a building moratorium in place, one of the questions was, what do the citizens want? Where do we want to be? What kind of things do we want to have Kingsburg look like in 10 years, which is why we have the North Kingsburg specific plan. Anyway, that's the whole plug. We need to go ahead and do the surveys, get the input from the constituents, from the citizens, to where we want to be. Do we want to look like Clovis? Do we want to look like Fresno? That's not the feeling that occurred 25, 30 years ago. And I think that feeling is still the feeling of most residents of Kingsburg.
I believe that COG has some grant money, again, to go in as a collaborative to help with that, with the general plan. Not for all of it, but at least a piece of it, so if that could help with a little, and this could help with some, that helps us along the way. Especially, you're right, it's gonna cost us at least that much money.
I just want to clarify, so I'm not writing down the wrong thing. You're talking about the general plan update,
Yes,
not the strategic plan update, just general plan update.
Just general plan.
yeah, general plan, because you have to have the general plan in place.
I just want to make sure that's what your pitch is for, so I'm not writing down the wrong thing.
Our strategic plan, we did here, you know, we had Jackie Ryle come in and help us with that, and that was just over a couple of days, and that was not much consultant work.
Anyone else from the public that would like to?
Reggie Gerke, here on behalf of actually the Chamber of Commerce right now. Looking at this list, there's a lot of really good things on here. And I know from the Chamber's standpoint, sustainability is a big thing for businesses. And looking at businesses as a whole, everything from, I know we put a lot of focus on, we love retail, we love restaurants, because we see the hard numbers that come from those that benefit the community, but there's a lot of other organizations too that are really the backbone of what makes our community. You guys mentioned CAPS helping out with the meals. All those other nonprofits that, a lot of them really didn't qualify for any of the original relief funds, if we're gonna talk COVID money at that point. They got passed over because they just didn't meet the requirements. But putting a plan together to use this money in a way that really benefits future businesses, currently and future, in a way that makes them sustainable. And I mean, I'm talking everything from infrastructure planning, things like your master plan for the city. Obviously, we gotta know where businesses are gonna end up or if there's gonna be space for more businesses. And that also leads into the more businesses, the more residences we have and, people moving in. So, and then putting the infrastructure in place, whether it's water, public safety, communications, all of that goes with it too. I think we got a nice pot of money right here that lets us go a long ways and really setting us up for being a great community. Not that we're not already, but you continuing to be a great community that really supports businesses and the people within it. And that can go a long ways. I completely agree with Bruce on coming up with a plan and updating it. 30 years is a long time ago, but I think a lot of people do still feel the same in general as they did maybe 30 years ago. So, but the world's changed a little, the technology, the businesses and everything too, but remembering everything at the same time, not just focusing on the big ticket things that we can see, but all the little guys, the mom and pops and everything that really make Kingsburg what Kingsburg is.
What would you suggest with that? Focus on, not the infrastructure, but you talked about the small businesses.
Yeah, so looking at small businesses, nonprofits, I know Alex wrote it up there great. I know one of the things that you guys had in here, I lost it, COVID related, replace lost revenue, nonprofits, looking at those, coming up with a grant program that they could apply for, that not necessarily to help them with recovery side of it, but help them, move to the next level. How can we get these businesses really to move, step up a little bit, and make them a little bit more, beneficial to the community and give them better capacity and bandwidth to be able to do what they're doing. And that can be anything from, needing some help to update some office equipment or purchasing the next thing they need to do their next thing they're doing, or even the city putting infrastructure in place that also then supports them too. So all of those, whatever we can do to, whether they're applying for money directly or it's money coming in behind them to support them. I don't have great specifics, but I know there's a lot of really good options out there. I know you guys put the fiber optic build out, and that's a big deal because communication really is. I know we talk about having lots of options in town already, but this is a completely different ballgame. right here, and it's very different from a standpoint of supporting the city and what the city operates and does too. Even builds into the next one down the list, which is the public safety cameras and putting the infrastructure to really make those good and viable. So being able to put those infrastructures in place benefits really everyone. And then it also helps get to offer something pretty substantial that a lot of communities can't offer to housing developments and new businesses wanting to come in too.
Yeah, I will say, lots of communities are in kind of different spots with their ARPA funding, right? So a lot of them are kind of in the same spot we are, where they're doing planning right now, seeking input. Some of them have allocated all of it. But it's really hyper-local to what individual places need, right? Another community may, there's lots of communities, large communities that are spending it on affordable housing and, assisting with homeless, and, those are just sort of their larger, but, their challenges right now. So that's kind of the, I think from a staff standpoint is what we want to hear is, what are the big areas that we can focus on, because like, if it's a nonprofit grant program, okay, let's set some funding aside, let's pick that amount, and then we'll come up with a program, right? Kind of like what we did with the CARES Act funding that we did for small businesses, where we had, a grant program where they could, apply and be eligible for up to a certain amount. So those are the direction standpoint, kind of what we're interested in. Hearing what's most important, because we, kind of we're invested in what we're working on here already, right? And, we're in our departments and know all those sorts of things, and we try and, as much as we can, to be, have our ears open and listen to community needs as well. But, you guys are out there, and certainly from the council standpoint, you're hearing, constituents calls to what are those big items, or what are the challenges? Is it, more green space, or improving those green spaces that we already have, or things too?
I'm Judy Pagel, and I'm here representing Kiwanis. When you say nonprofit, a grant from nonprofits due to loss of funds, Kiwanis is suffering from that. Our scholarship funds are down, and those go to local seniors. Can you describe what you refer to as nonprofit?
Well, I think, that kind of becomes how you craft the program. So I would say probably, you'd have to have some guidelines, like maybe they're registered 501c3s that are, active in Kingsburg, and, there's usually, most of the programs that I've seen created right now is there has to be some nexus, some litmus to, loss of funds from COVID, right? So in your particular case, if the council, created a program, had a certain amount of funding for it, you determine who's eligible, so if it's 501c3s in the community, we try and create an application form that would basically say, what's your, what are you asking for the funds for? What do you want to use them for? And then there's usually some sort of a narrative or, reason for, asking for the funding. And then, there would be, a maximum grant amount or things like that. But, just to compare it to when we did the small business grant, I think the council took a lot of care to try and make sure that it was easy to fill out, that it qualified so we would never have to give the money back, but that it was also easy for staff to sort of process them and go through it, because that's a kind of a piece of it too, is that if there's, if you're opening it up to all the nonprofits, then they can all submit applications, and then it becomes, depending upon whether or not there's funding, what that funding amount is. But that's kind of, I think I would probably suggest, if I, was going to suggest it would kind of run similar to the small business one, where it's like, it's probably a grant, and then whatever that amount is, and, then if it goes to Kiwanis, for example, then you guys decide how you're gonna, plug that back into the community.
Thank you.
How short is Kiwanis? Because
Pardon me?
how much of an impact did you feel?
Kiwanis? Well, I can give you a really good example. We just, in 2021, gave Traver 3 laptops, 2 printers for their after-school program. So Kiwanis is focused mostly on children and the community, children first community. Today, there was 3 of us down there cleaning the doll alley. We, planted new plants, we cleaned up all of the old plants. Last year, we painted the tops of the trash cans, so Kiwanis tries to have an impact, and we keep looking for projects to do. So we're very active, even though we're small, we're still very active.
Kiwanis lost funding
Yes.
because of the fact that the concerts were, they normally sell ice cream at the concerts, and those are the kind of things
And
that's where you need to replace those funds.
my question was a little bit unclear. I'm asking how much financial impact did you guys get because of that shutdown?
Yeah, I can probably give you just a kind of a ballpark. Normally, we give pretty close to $10,000 in scholarships to Kingsburg High School students. And I think this last year, we were down to like 55, 65. So I would say round figures about 5,000. And we couldn't do our pulled pork fundraiser, which is one of our biggest of the year, because of the restrictions on preparing food and such as that. So COVID really impacted our group, and sadly, we lost 2 very, very strong members, one due to COVID and one just passed away. But so we've had impacts in a couple of different directions. So, but we're still working.
Thank you.
If you want to talk about a specific project that you could go ahead and show some immediate impact, downtown parking is atrocious. As the chamber knows, and I know we just had a parking study that showed that, there's adequate parking and such. However, when you actually look at that parking study, the critical times, there's no parking spots available. And for the merchants, for the restaurants, the critical times are like later in the late afternoons. If you try to find any parking at noon around downtown, yeah, and what I'm saying is that there's land that the city could go ahead and purchase, and if the city simply purchased some land, well, we're talking right across the way here, purchased the land and mandated that their own employees park in that area.
City employees,
Pardon?
city staff?
Yeah, city staff, you would go ahead and free up at least 15 to 20 parking spots downtown. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but studies have been shown that if somebody has to drive, I know this sounds, you walk and park in shopping centers, but in a downtown area, if you can't park within half a block of where you want to do business, a lot of times people will go ahead and say, I won't do it, I'll come back in 2 or 3 hours, and then they get sidelined, or they wind up going to Fresno or something.
I know the chamber also talked to businesses to have them not park in front of the owners or the workers for businesses downtown not to park in front of the stores, but they still do that as well.
But I'm saying,
Yeah.
but it's
No, you're right.
city staff,
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
well, it's not, yeah,
It's a lot, it's
both.
multiple
It's both.
reasons, so.
well, and we just had a new fruit broker open in the main part of town, and they've got 15 employees. And every
And all
car,
that's where they're parked
out front.
15 car was on Main Street this morning, I can guarantee you, because
I-
they were there when I
I'm
got
sure
to
you
work this
saw it,
morning.
yeah. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's a very concrete, fast fix. You can do that in 6 months.
Like a permit-based parking area, so people that are businesses know they have a reserved parking spot in the parking lot. Maybe it's a half a block they have to walk to work, but at least that saves the parking spot in front of their business for people to come spend money with them.
Well, I know, kind of piggyback on that, we're gonna be getting some more, we have one just arrived, chargers, car chargers, for electric cars. One's come in, we are guaranteed 10 from, FCRTA, and, they're free, but there's still the infrastructure part of things we'd have to pay for. But then also, FCRTA also wants to buy some land down here for parking, because they'd like to do, some shade solar for us. And so Moses is looking for a place that's tough to find, you know, land. I think he needs, what, a quarter acre he'd like to have?
At least, yeah.
Yeah, down here. So we have some opportunity, but it's hard, how do you find that much property
It's expensive.
down in our
You just have to
area?
pay for it.
Huh?
You just have to pay for it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, downtown property, 3 years ago, was fairly inexpensive. Not that way anymore.
Very expensive.
Yeah, but it's still hard to find that much open area too, that people are willing to sell.
You just need to negotiate properly.
You know who, some of the ones I'm talking about too. So, but that's another opportunity that we could add to that as well, is some money for infrastructure for electric charging. That's something that, you know, brings in our economic development side of things too, because we're trying to get people to come into town. They have to, you know, when they stop to charge their cars, they're gonna have to shop and eat for a while as well, and that's where the more and more people, as we saw the prices of gas, we're gonna have more and more people going toward electric cars.
I had some thoughts in looking at this, and, coming from like my day job perspective and working with families, especially like within our community, thinking about things that are, pretty important to, I'm just thinking of like our Kingsburg families, but families in general, when they're looking for a place to live, and I think families are really concerned about safety. We're a pretty safe community, and when I see the cameras as a need, that would help with the safety. Being able to provide for their families, which would be if they're working from home, a business in our community, to me, then the fiber optics or the infrastructure really stands out as something that could be, the cameras, the fiber optics, a huge impact for a long time with this amount of money. And then the third thing is, I know that many of, adults too, but our youth are struggling with mental health because of the impact of the pandemic. And a huge thing that helps with that was taken away from them was the ability to do sports and recreation. And thinking that that sports park or sports complex could really impact so many kids for like generations to come and families that would provide that mental health support also. So in my mind, I was just trying to narrow it down to what could be a big impact that would be felt beyond 2026.
The sports complex would also be good for economic development as well, bringing in.
And the fiber optics.
Anytime you can bring people into town and they're captive for more than 2 or 3 hours, they have to eat.
Yeah,
And if they have to be here more than one day, they have to have find a place to stay, so,
get gas
and get gas and will help them spend their money.
I have two questions, to follow up on that. The cost of the first phase of the sports complex, do we know that? And then if you can remind us the cost of the fiber optics, like the estimate of the build out.
The sports complex one is tough because it just depends on what you envision as phase one. So, you know, so a lot of that has been a little bit funding dependent, right? You know, so, you know, if we can get.
How much do you need to start a true capital fundraising project for that?
That's
gotta be our phase
I
one.
think it's probably between 3 and 5 million. But I think that, you know, I know that there's private dollars that are available right now. So it's really a matter of, it's kind of a timing question, of, you know, we allocate a certain amount of this money, you know, if you take some developer impact fee dollars, put those together and say, okay, the city's gonna commit $1 million, right? And then you put that out there to, you know, and then there's already this amount of dollars for the private sector that's been raised, and, you know, then you're putting together more of a fundraising campaign. We've been trying to time that with the grant, trying to get like a larger grant. Those are usually successful. Like, that's what I think we're gonna see with, you know, the dog park, for example, where the fiber, so, you know, we have our, kind of the initial build out that's occurring, that's not happening from the city, but I think our projection is somewhere between 2 to 2.5 million was our ask to try and get the build out, which basically then gets it to every neighborhood in the community, and then, allows it to be expanded beyond, city limits too, which we think is a good selling point for getting state dollars or federal dollars, because now you're expanding the infrastructure and allowing it to grow even beyond the city limits. Kind of what we've been talking about internally a little bit, just to give folks some insight of how it would work, is potentially the city would install, basically the conduit, so just the pipes, the lines, things like that, and we would lease that to an internet service provider so that they could, do that work. I'm not really interested in getting into the internet business, and so that we have to maintain it and do all those sorts of things, but then we lease it, it's affordable, and, then there's some controls over what the cost for that is, so that helps us with, we can provide a low-income option, but really, gets it to every house. And then I think that's a really big, that is an economic development piece too, because if you're a business that needs that reliable internet, which is basically every, business these days now, right? That becomes a big selling point. And if you're not beholden to just Comcast or, just AT&T or someone like that, then, it makes us a little bit more of a competitive player on that level as well. 2 million-ish range.
No, we'll hear back, from the senator on our.
Yeah, I reached out, I haven't gotten a response yet, and we're also waiting too, because there's some infrastructure, I know that there's $65 billion or something like that in the infrastructure bill, for fiber, but we haven't, at least I haven't seen, guidance on how that will be, yeah.
I'll speak to what I look at with this. I'm just more like a hard numbers with it kind of person. I think fiber is a clear front runner for me, and I'd like to see us allocate $1 million towards that program. As a true, I feel like if we commit to that level, we're building the infrastructure, and then when we get infrastructure build stuff, when we get grants and stuff, we're already ahead of the game. We've started that, and we can build on it to make it a bigger program. Even that $2.5 million, that doesn't get us everything that we want. We allocate that $1 million to get it where we want, and then if we get these state dollars or federal dollars in the future, that's when we make it everything that we want. I don't see a scenario in which we're not gonna come out of pocket $1 million to get fiber throughout the town. The benefits for that are very significant. It reaches businesses, public safety, that touches everybody. It can help with distance learning students. It can help with low income, people working from home. And the biggest thing for me is, if we own the pipe and, that's being leased from these service providers, we have some control in what that ends up costing. We can put regulations in there so that we don't end up having to be owned by Comcast. Comcast can come in tomorrow and say, hey, all you businesses, we want $350 a month now. If we have the fiber lines, they don't get to say that. We control that, and that can help our businesses forever. Mm-hmm. But again, the fiber is a little bit of eating your vegetables. Nobody loves it. It's not a big sexy thing, but it's going to get us what we want. So for me, that's a huge one. I'd like to see at least $350,000 put towards the general plan. It's another eating your vegetables thing. We have to do it, but it's what's going to make us stay who we are. And everybody's about building more. For me, Kingsburg is more about staying who we are, and I think that plan is very important in making sure that we have the paper backing to show this is our direction. We can't deviate just because there's a new shiny object to chase. This is still who we are, and we can kind of concrete that, and it's not 30 years old. So I'd like to see $300,000 towards that, $1 million towards fiber, $100,000 towards a competitive small business grant to help them. I think that the fiber will help, but I want anything with a small business to be competitive, because I want them to have to come to us and say, this is what we're doing with it. This is how we're going to become better. This is how we're going to benefit the citizens. I don't just want it to be just a, hey, times are tough, here's money. I want to be able to say, this is how we give back to community. Kiwanis, we give scholarships to students in town. Perfect. We're seeing something for that. Chamber, same thing. If we're going to give money to the chamber, then that's great, but I wanna know what the chamber's gonna do with it. I don't want it to just be, here's some free money, because you guys survived a hard time. I want to see returns, and plans for that, and I think if we do that through a competitive process. And that leaves us with about $400,000, which senior center or sports complex, I'd support each one of those.
Is it necessarily the nonprofit though?
A waffle on the nonprofit. Not 100% sure how that rolls out. They're important, and so I hate saying it like that, but I just don't know how it fits in. I don't know how we do the competition with that. And how much that opens up when we say nonprofit. If that ends up being every possible thing, it would for sure have to be a competitive process. So I think that's gonna open it up for churches and stuff too, right?
So we usually have excluded churches, any religious,
And that's my concern, is how do we carve out some?
If you make it competitive, but you also give them the opportunity to apply, and you can maybe see what they can bring to the table, and that, I think a lot of them felt they've just been left out of all of the COVID money over the last 2 years. They didn't even get the opportunity to apply.
That's fair.
So just giving them an opportunity to apply, and if they can't prove that they make the money worthwhile, then they don't get a grant.
That's where I was for that. I like that.
Yeah, for me, it's build out fiber optic is, pretty much top of my list. But also, I like the fact of putting a grant program for small business and for nonprofit. I think that's important. Our city. And then Bruce brought up a good point, but, it's the general plan, It's very important, so. Fiber, number one for me.
That's what I think is a huge step overall. I think it's one of the things we're gonna do it at some point. We have an opportunity with these one-time dollars to kind of push through. I think once people start seeing the benefit, it'll be more fun.
I've written down just a couple of statements and then kind of filled it in. Any of these that we're looking at, investing in projects that give us, the biggest bang for our buck, the return on our investment. So whether it's economic development, does that tie back in, like we've talked about a little bit already, economic development, tourism, businesses, does it support our businesses, housing, parks, et cetera? Or could it be, this is, or one-time funds that we normally don't have money in our budget or difficult to find grants for? Because sometimes as we look at some of these things, this is the first time we've had money for this, because again, tough to find grants. So as I'm looking at anything we put down, I'm kind of going back to this to see how this would fit in. I think, sports complex and parks, are really important. And for the reasons we've already talked about, fiber optics as well. Businesses, whether through grants, the facade program, the support that they need, I think we've done a good job supporting them with, small business grants. And, the senior center as well, I want to continue to make sure we're upgrading that to support our seniors.
What was the cost of the kitchen, do you remember?
Yeah,
Not the one that we sent off, it was like 700.
yeah.
But just the kitchen, not the whole remodel.
So we're working on that, kind of a remodel of the existing kitchen now. Whenever you crack those open, we've got to do some upgrades to some of our, got to put in a hood and an ansel system, things like that. So I think we're thinking it's going to be somewhere in between 100 and 200,000 probably to do that correctly. New sinks and some of those things, but we're getting, Adam and Dave Peters' office are working on those right now as part of our potential grant ask of the healthcare district as well.
Or nonprofits as well with, I mean, even the Historical Park and the train depot, because they lost revenue. They were closed a lot last year to make sure that membership, I know, has been down as well, but then they weren't closed, they weren't having the school tours they normally have, and then also, they weren't having people coming in, so I know that they lost, you know, people at the gate, so to speak. And weddings and things like that out at the Historical Park. That's where I'm headed towards.
I heard the fiber mentioned a lot. One thing to just kind of add a couple of, help out a little bit in that thought process. I know you're talking about projects that have some sustainability, and it's not just dump money once, and then once the money's gone, the project goes away. Nice thing about a project like that is it's an income revenue stream also for the city through that lease process, but it's self-sustaining, it's self-maintaining, it's you're partnering with the businesses that are making that happen, to where it's not you spend a bunch of money and then it goes away. It only continues to get better as time goes.
Direction do you need?
Well, I mean, I definitely heard, I mean, Councilmember Purcell, there's some actual numbers out there. Are you guys thinking more number amounts? Want to have some more discussion on that looks like? I mean, I think what I heard for sure was, you know, small business and nonprofit, so put together a program that then the council can discuss what that looks like. Now, I don't know from the chamber's perspective, and maybe it's a good question for the bid too, but I know when we originally did the small business program, that was at the height of the pandemic, and, you know, they were closed down. I don't know what their challenges currently are. I think the biggest challenge is finding people to work for them. But from a lost revenue, things like that, I think I would be curious to get some of that input from them, because, you know, if we put together a program where there's $100,000 available, right, if you're a business owner, you know, you're going to apply for it. So I just want to make sure that we're hitting the spots, I guess, that maybe either haven't been hit already by CARES dollars, or, you know, we want to focus on other areas that we haven't done yet as well. So I don't want to leave them out. They're obviously important. I mean, they struggle through all these things as well. It's just, that's the hard part about trying to prioritize where the funds go.
I think with that, we're talking about what the businesses could benefit the most from is, if anything, being able to offer competitive wages, which would then help them with being able to get employees, because it's hard to get an employee at minimum wage anymore. Nobody wants to work for minimum wage. So helping do a payroll offset in a way, I guess, is an option there that would help them. It's a short-term help, because they have to then come up with the funds to be able to continue doing that. But if you got the employees, you spend money to make money. It's kind of the old idea, but if you can spend it on the front end and come in on the back end.
My only concern with, let's just call it payroll supplement, is this money stops.
Yes.
If the business isn't gonna sustain, I don't wanna use $100,000 of city tax dollars to keep you around for 6 more months.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's, you know, it's unfortunate, but if a business can't survive based on that, we can't supplement it forever.
Right.
So that's where I would kind of want them to say, well, you come to us and tell us how you're gonna do it. You know what I mean? What does this money mean to you?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it's like, you know, I hate saying it like this, but you gotta come sell it. If you want the money, you gotta come sell it. You gotta explain to everybody, this is all of our dollars, how those dollars are gonna translate back somehow.
I completely agree with you, and I'd love to hear some of those ideas too, just from our businesses, because we hear a lot of that of, well, we just need more money. Well, yeah, everybody just needs more money. If I had more money, that'd solve all my problems, right? Well, how's it gonna benefit you? How's more money benefit you? Beyond just,
Well, how does it benefit the town?
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly.
No benefits to business, of course.
In the short term, yeah, but what's the long-term benefit to the business and to the community too, so.
I think especially if it's a nonprofit, we would wanna know, like, how are you gonna benefit, like, a big part of our community?
Mhm.
Not just like one isolated, group of people within our community,
Right.
but how are you impacting the community as a whole? What did you lose and what is your plan, with this money? And I think that there should be a cap, like you can only ask for up to this amount of money. We don't wanna give $100,000 just to one person. You know, we did that with the small business grants, and maybe considering if you got it in round one, you got it in round two, you don't get to apply in round three.
I know a lot of the grants that are out there for nonprofits, very few of them actually pay for salaries. So that is quite often excluded in nonprofit-related grants. They're usually specifically to capital projects, whether it's purchasing of something or, you know, helping with with training. I mean, it can be used on people, but not to pay for people.
And I don't know that I feel comfortable giving $60 towards nonprofit payment, you know what I mean? That's
Sure.
that's a tough spot.
I would agree with you. As a taxpayer and a citizen of Kingsburg, I would agree with you on that.
So what about, one direction as far as how much money to set aside, and then whether or not it's gonna be for all businesses or nonprofits or two separate pools that are competitive? So-
Yeah, I mean, maybe some direction, so that then we can craft some, I can go, you know, frankly, go see what some other places have done, and then try and craft it for ourselves, you know, we can do that, and then you guys can say, well, we like this part, but we don't necessarily like this part, you know?
There's a current one right now out, Fresno County has one for businesses right now, I think it's 2,500.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they were the ones that didn't get the state grant. If those rounds,
Anybody can apply for this one.
There's a lot of restrictions on it. Like, there's a lot of things that disqualify you, like you have to have so many employees, or you can't have so many employees.
Yeah.
You have to show a loss and all those things. It's actually really well written. It's very, very
Yeah,
focused.
easy to apply, I know, too, because I was helping somebody with one.
Profit had to be under, I think, $50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I read it, and you could never see the California relief grants that they gave out.
I think the $50,000 revenue cap is rough. If you're not making $50,000 a year, you're not in business.
So how much would you want to get out of this money towards that?
But some of our smaller ones, and especially people who like are in, like salons and things like that, that are,
They're right,
Private,
they're right there. Yeah,
yeah.
that's fair. Yeah, but if you're paying rent for a building and utilities and all that, you're gonna, you know.
I think we cap it again, and obviously put money aside and cap it like we did last time. I think that's gonna be important.
We did 3,000 or 4,000, didn't we? Three, if
We
we
did
were.
$3,000 ones, I'll go back and check.
Yeah.
What would you guys say, because we have until what time to spend this?
2026. Yeah,
So
so
what do you think
I'm
about
not in a hurry
if
by these.
No, but if we tier it every year, $25,000 a year, for each one of those years, and every year is a submittal, as a competitive process. Because then we hold on to the money for a little bit longer.
I think we've had a lot of really good success too with partnership projects, or like projects that impact like the whole downtown, right? Like the work that we've done on like the alley projects, right? Or like, you know, working with, you know, the Optic group to do their parklet that's gonna go out on Smith Street or things like that. So are there, you know, like whether it's with the chamber and the bid maybe or something like that, where we partner on a project that's maybe is a larger infrastructure project, or some of those improvements to the downtown or other areas of commercial development that doesn't get as much attention as the downtown maybe, that have a community-wide impact. You know, I don't know what those, you know, like we talk about, I mean, it's a small thing, but creating a fund to replace all the Christmas decorations, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of, that's a lot there. You know, we just bought new banners for the downtown. I think every time we get a new set of banners, $50,000, you know what I mean? So things like that, you know, can we convert? We've got a couple of alleyways that are left that could be converted. Maybe there's a way for us to figure out how we use these dollars to make more plate-making spaces in the downtown that then everybody gets to use when they come down here.
The like beautification and downtown improvement.
Yeah, I think I had it sort of, you know, I think there's so many there's a bunch of different options. Bruce won't like it, but I think that there's a piece of property next to Los Pepes that has some parking on it right now that is potentially for sale. So you buy that, and now you've got an alley next to it, and that, can you transform that whole space into a public placemaking space now? So
Right.
that's like an idea that then you could, you know, utilize these dollars, one-time dollars to long-lasting downtown.
The city did a project, I can't remember when it was, but it's where you did the matching funds, like, I think that's when we got all the streetlights repainted, right? So the city helps pay so much if you come to the table with so much. And doing that partnerships with those businesses that are directly next to it, and the community organizations, that wanna help with that, I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we have a micro grant program, you know, a lot of the beautification projects, usually it was, Don Workman would come in and he would say, I want this done next week and I've got $10,000, I'll match it. And I'd say, okay, well, if you put up $10,000, then, you know, we'll figure out a way to make it happen, right? You know, and something like that. So it's just how we structure those sorts of things. I know Kiwanis just painted a bunch of poles, I think, downtown. So.
Are you thinking like something separate than what we were talking about, or are you thinking that in a small business grant, that it would be more of like something that we pay half of? Like, you say this is your project, you're gonna put up this much, and then we'll
Match it.
Yeah, I don't know, if, you know, like I said, we did a couple of rounds of targeted small business grants. So instead of doing another one of those, do we do something that's more focused, that's then used by everyone as opposed to individual grants? Because I think there's a struggle, I think the struggle too from a staff perspective in trying to, I like competitive too, but man, you start to, okay, who's better than who here, right? You know what I mean? Like, who deserves it more than the next person? And everybody was impacted by COVID, so usually that's the nexus, right? Like, did you lose money? Yeah, you know, I mean, or if you're a service group, your service club that's a 501c3, you couldn't fundraise for, you know, a year, so you can't do those things, right? So that gets a little tougher. So and you know, sometimes it's harder to do those more, you know, they're public, but they're aesthetic, but I mean, they have, I think, big impacts in the downtown. I mean, I think you can see that in the steady transformation in some of those alleys. And, you know, we were just back by the Magash one, by the, you know, the Morgan's one, you know, and that's, I think when that's done, that's gonna be a really nice, you know, space, so.
That's one of the things that Bid's been talking about a lot lately too, is those outdoor spaces in downtown and making downtown walkable, reasons for people to stick around longer instead of just parking, grabbing, and leaving. So, yeah.
Or there's a more focused, you know, we really like those outdoor spaces, but like a challenge for businesses is that they have to buy this expensive furniture. So we want to support those public spaces, so maybe our grant is helping to buy that furniture, or something along those lines, you know, something that, I don't know.
I like that idea. I like, there's buy-in from the businesses, so one of the comments that council member, Rochelle had mentioned is like, we don't want to give money to a business and then they're not in business in 6 months.
Yeah.
If you're looking at matching something like that, they're investing in the building, in the downtown where they're committing, they have skin in the game.
Yeah, I think that's been the big, go ahead, please.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I've had businesses reach out for the facade grant that aren't in the downtown area, that are on Sierra, that could use that money to improve the front of their business also, but they don't qualify, you know? So there are other businesses outside of the downtown that could use beautification projects.
Good idea. Just expanding. Yeah, when we started, you know, it was, I mean, that program's been really, really successful, and it's been, we kind of were like, hey, we're gonna start with this corridor, but yeah, we could have funding in other areas, but we never all benefit from that. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking, maybe even including the business part, and we're gonna have 1,000 employees out there. It's a thought, I never thought of it as, you know, improving that, like with benches or landscaping, and they're all private property now, but, you know, that's a way to look at that, and make some public spaces.
Dust bowl and weeds.
Right.
Okay. All right, well, let us work on, I think a couple of maybe programs, and then we can, one of the things I was thinking about, does anyone have any objections if we put together a little survey, a survey monkey or something, putting something out to the community, see if there's more input in terms of the community's, desires, needs, things like that.
Okay.
I don't know, other questions, other input?
That's a major factor that goes into your general plan.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
You've got to go ahead and do that. If you're going to upgrade your general plan, you've got to get, and that's part of the environmental study, big ticket stuff. You've got to hire an outside consultant to bring all this stuff together. And, without a plan, you're just shotgunning here and there.
I mean, I know, we have a program right now too that supports a lot of the private investment that's made to rehab a lot of our buildings. So, like the fire sprinkler things like that. I don't know, CJ, you see that stuff, right? Sprinklers, ADA improvements, I mean, other things from a builder's perspective that would remove the difficulties in rehabbing some of our old buildings?
Well, I think that there has to be a skin in the game factor that has people wanting to provide a level. I think if you just look at the traffic in downtown now, the split traffic in general, it's, I don't know any other small town that's like it. So, I mean, what's being done is being done and it's working. So I think there's just a couple more ways to ratchet stuff up and provide more of an overall appearance that everybody has, but make people pony up for it also. Because otherwise it doesn't seem like there's just a lot of spinning wheels. So I don't know how you can solve that, but.
That's a good question. I mean, I just know that there are difficult obstacles to trying to rehab some of these buildings, or, if you gotta put in sprinklers or whatever that looks like, they're not cheap.
It's helped us. It's been a huge factor in deciding a lot of directions in terms of which way we can go. Because when you're shouldering everything, it limits your desire to expand, shall we say. So it's certainly been a benefit for us.
All right. Any other staff members want to throw their hands up because none of their projects got mentioned?
Holly's happy.
I mean, I know Holly got a lot of vegetables, vegetables. I know when I first contributed here back in July, I was only here for a year, going on my second year here, and as we kind of peeled back kind of some of the layers here, our facilities do need some attention, roofs, water system, fire hydrant location. I know Chief's not here, but he'd probably be giving me a big cheer at the end, and probably giving me some vegetables to take home. But also, some money that we would need kind of to fix some of the issues that are wrong with some of our facilities. Nothing major, but definitely some of the one-time funds that could kind of take us through the next 5-10 years, and some immediate needs that we need to take care of, both at PE, some of the roof issues that we're having. Like I said, it could be used, some of the funds, like I said, something anywhere between $60,000 to $80,000. Total, yeah, that's for roofs and fire hydrants.
What about beautification things that you need?
So we're working on some of those. So we got the poles getting painted. I think we found some ways to get those paid for. But then there's trees. Like I said, I don't know if this is the arena or if we can go through the budget process and find some alternative funding locations for those. Good thoughts. Okay. Anything else?
I'll ask them.
Yeah, go ahead, yeah.
My name's Adam Hughes, I'm a citizen in Kingsburg. Some of you might know me from the swim programs in town, from the Kingsburg Seawolves or TNT. I'm here in a capacity, I've been working with Alex to what is vast networks. The way we started was from a federal grant that has infrastructure throughout the state of California to take fiber optic to remote areas. A lot of the local telephone companies that are independently owned came together to build out their own footprint. And there was this big need for it, I think, about 12 years ago when they won the grant, because a lot of the remote communities didn't have any kind of high-speed internet. You know, so we're in areas of the state that are not accessible by some of the big companies like Comcast, AT&T. We're a totally separate fiber optic provider. We work primarily in the space of education and government, and understand the importance of the need for getting it there. And as I see some of the projects that are coming up, so things like community camera systems are a big importance for the city. Those work 100 times better if you have the infrastructure to support them on being able to review those cameras immediately rather than delayed feedback, right? Or in the future, as far as the general plan goes, you guys are probably want to look at stoplights in other areas of town. Those work a lot better if you have the fiber optic infrastructure in place as well. So things as the general plan grows and you can get the new plan going, I think the fiber optic's a pretty important piece of it, from just being a community member and looking at the things that it can do, from having it in the ground and ready to go. So those projects that you put money to actually perform the way that you want them to. And I'm here in a capacity to help out and see what we can help you guys do. And we are the ones that are bringing the fiber to the downtown right now, comes down Golden State.
Well, I just really appreciate all of you coming and providing the input. I think that's the most important part, because otherwise we're just a little bit. We appreciate you guys coming tonight, and we'll follow up with some other things, and probably have some more workshops, and like, we've done this money for a little while, so it'll be an ongoing discussion. So if there are other things that you hear about or that come up, please let me know, or let council members know. We'll go from there.